may we request everyone to stand and join us in the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, pero sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang pinirang, kuya ka ng magiting, sa manlulubing, di ka pasisigil, sa dagatang tunog sa simoy at sa langit kong bagaw, ay hinagang tugang awit sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawan ko'y tagumpay na nagkikinig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may magkikinig. Lumanang araw ng warhabit pansin ka, ko'y langit sa piling mo. Ang ligaya na partay malaki, at mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Please be seated. On June 3, 2011, recognizing the status of the Philippines as the primary supplier of maritime manpower to the global merchant fleet, the President issued Proclamation No. 183, declaring June 25 of every year as the Day of the Filipino Seafarer. To formally open this year's commemoration of the Day of the Filipino Seafarer, please welcome the 17th Administrator of the Maritime Industry Authority, Attorney Hernani N. Fabia, for the welcome remarks.
Distinguished guests, honored seafarers, ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to everyone. We gather here today to celebrate the remarkable day of the Filipino Seafarer. It is truly an honor to stand before you as the Administrator of the Maritime Industry Authority. Together, on this auspicious occasion, we pay tribute to the exceptional men and women who navigate the vast oceans carrying the Filipino spirit across the globe. In this occasion, as we commemorate the Day of the Filipino Seafarer, we set our sights on an essential concern of the maritime industry, that is, the protection of our marine environment. Aligned with the World Maritime theme, MARPOL at 50, our commitment goes on. Our campaign this year seeks to highlight the invaluable contribution of seafarers in safeguarding our oceans. Ang mga marino bilang ating mga modern-day heroes, ang isa sa mga nangunguna sa pamangalaga ng ating mga karagatan. Ang kanilang dedikasyon at profesionalismo ay bumubuo ng pundasyon sa industriya ng maritima. At hindi maipagkakaila ang kanilang kontribusyon. Sila ay walang pagod na nagtatrabaho upang itaguyod ang global na kalakalan, habang pinapanatili ang pinakamataas at napamantayan ng environmental responsibility. Furthermore, as we gather here today, we must also acknowledge the challenges that lie ahead. It is imperative that we address the systemic issues that currently beset our industry. Kinakailangan nating matulungan ang pamahalaan, mga kinatawan ng industriya at mga institusyong pang-edukasyon upang ayusin ang sistema, tiyaking mahusay na sinusuportahan ang ating mga marino at binibigyan sila ng mga oportunidad para sa kanilang professional advancement at pag-uunlad. Dagdag pa rito, kailangan nating maunawaan ang nagbabagong mga ambisyon ng mga batang henerasyon sa panahong ito. The allure of a seafaring career, once a proud tradition passed down through generations, now faces a different landscape. Today's generation are presented with an array of career choices and opportunities, and many may not see themselves embarking on a career at sea. As we look to the future, we must bridge the gap between the aspirations of our youth and the continued need of Filipino seafarers in the global maritime industry. Tungkulin nating ipakita ang napakaraming oportunidad na hatid ng profesyong pandagat. Bigyan diin ang mahalagang karanasan, pag-unlad na personalidad at mga koneksyon sa buong mundo. Let us inspire the younger generation, ensuring that they understand the significance of seafaring and their contribution to the maritime world, including the impact they can have on protecting our oceans. Together, let us embark on a transformative journey by strengthening the system, addressing the concerns of our seafarers, and engaging with the younger generation. We can ensure that the world continues to benefit from the exceptional skills, expertise, and work ethics of Filipino seafarers. Tulong-tulong tayo na gumawa ng landas na hindi lamang mag-aakit ng bagong talento, kundi pati na rin magpapamanatili at mag-aalaga sa kasanayan ng mga taong naghandog sa kanilang buhay sa dakilang propesyon na ito. Today, we proudly affirm that the Day of the Filipino Seafarer is not just a celebration of their bravery and sacrifice, but also a recognition of their role as environmental advocates. Our seafarers are actively implementing the MARPOL regulations, ensuring the proper handling and disposal of wastes, preventing oil spills, and protecting marine life from the harmful effects of pollution. Sa okasyong ito, ating kilalanin ang mga marino na nag-aalay ng kanilang buhay, hindi lamang upang tiyakin ang ligtas at mabisang pagpapatakbo ng mga sasakyan pandagat, kundi pati na rin sa pamangangalaga ng karagatan. Let us express our deepest gratitude to their families who stand strong in their absence. Today, we unite in celebration and reflection, fully aware that our collective efforts shape the future of our oceans. Inaanyayahan ko kayong lahat na yakapin ang diwa ng pagkakaisa at magtulungan upang makagawa ng pagbabago. Let us empower our seafarers, equip them with the knowledge and skills they need, and provide them with a supportive environment that enables them to thrive. Together, let us ensure that our commitment to protecting the marine environment remains resolute and unwavering, because our oceans are worth protecting. Once again, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all the seafarers for their remarkable contributions to our economy, to our nation, and to the global maritime community. I wish our seafarers clear skies, fair winds, and following seas. Mabuhay ang mga Pilipinong marino saan mang sulok ng mundo. Happy Day of the Filipino Seafarers. Thank you.
Maraming salamat po, Marina Administrator Attorney Hernani Fabia, for that very inspiring message. In 2009, the Council of the International Maritime Organization, or the IMO, decided to name the year 2010 as the Year of the Seafarer. The decision was adopted as Resolution 18 of the Conference of Parties to the International Convention on Standards of Training, Certification, and Watchkeeping for Seafarers, or STCW, of 1978. Following the adoption of the Manila Amendments to the STCW Convention 1978 and to the STCW Code as amended, the conference also resolved to nominate the 25th June that year and each year thereafter as the Day of the Seafarer. It was the conference's Resolution 19. At this juncture, we will watch the video message from the IMO Secretary General, His Excellency Kita Klim, about this year's theme for the Day of the Seafarer, and to pay homage to our very own maritime professionals and merchant marine personnel, let us watch an AVP especially prepared for the 2023 Day of the Filipino Seafarers.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again we celebrate the International Day of the Seafarer on the 25th of June. This year we highlight seafarers' contribution to the safety of ships and protection of the marine environment. Every day, hundreds of thousands of seafarers are underway on ships, playing a vital role in the global trade, transporting cargoes and ensuring passengers reach their destinations safely. As the maritime sector continues to work toward making shipping more environmentally sound and sustainable, seafarers play an increasingly important role in helping to protect the health of our ocean and planet. Every day at the sea, they have to enforce IMO's environment-related treaties by implementing rules on garbage and sewage and air pollution prevention. This year, as we celebrate the 50-year anniversary of our main environmental instrument, MARPOL Convention, renewing our firm commitment toward the protection of our environment, this remains even more relevant. As the shipping industry accelerates its support of the global efforts to combat climate change by moving toward decarbonization, seafarers' voices, actions are key to ensuring a just transition to zero-carbon future. All this is to protect our precious oceans, which are the lifebloods of the planet. Dear seafarers, we invite you to share on social media what you see when you are at the sea. Show us the equipment you use to protect the environment, the special training you received, and tell us how you protect our ocean and the planet. And we invite everyone to use the hashtag Oceans Worth Protecting, whether you are seafarers yourself or are paying tribute to them. I look forward to seeing your pictures and reading your comments. Now, it just remains for me to wish you a happy International Day of the Seafarer 2023.
special acknowledgement is given to the STCW Office and the Manpower Development Service of the Maritime Industry Authority for developing this audiovisual presentation specially made for our seafarers in this year's celebration of the Day of the Filipino Seafarer, under the leadership of the heads of the steering committee, Director Arsenio Lingad II and Sir Louis Banwa, who is actually in a different site, leading the simultaneous campaign for MARPOL and a clean-up drive at the Las Piñas, Parañaque Wetland Park. Okay. As we continue today's celebration, and in observance of Proclamation 183 series of 2011, which mandates MARINA to lead the commemoration of the Day of the Filipino Seafarer and to make this year's celebration more meaningful, we shall now have a symposium in line with this year's theme, MARPOL at 50, Our Commitment Goes On. Our first speaker has been with the Maritime Industry Authority for 31 years. She started with MARINA as MIDS 1, or Maritime Industry Development Specialist 1, at the Manpower Development Service, and was promoted as Senior MIDS at the Policy and Planning Service of MARINA. Our speaker is a licensed naval architect and marine engineer, and she finished her bachelor's degree in 1985 in Namay Polytechnic Institute. She finished her master's in business administration in 1996, and in 2006, finished her Master's of Science specializing in maritime safety and environmental protection at the World Maritime University, Malmo, Sweden. She is currently the Vice President of the Luzon chapter of the Society of Naval Architects and Marine Engineers Incorporated. She is the Chief of the Shipyards Development and Licensing Division, Shipyards Regulation Service of MARINA. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Engineer Maria Teresa Daggio Mabisaw.
To our administrator, MARINA employees, our dear stakeholders, good morning. Please allow me to present the Philippine maritime industry, MARINA's regulations, initiatives, and projects, particularly in decarbonizing pathway for the maritime sector. This presentation provides an overview of the Philippine maritime industry, our initiatives and projects relating to decarbonization in shipping, our challenges, our way forward, and future efforts to provide energy efficiency in the shipping sector. The Philippine maritime industry is a vital component in attaining inclusive growth and socio-economic progress. The industry offers varied shipping industry services that connects the country's 7,641 islands. The Philippines is strategically located within the Asia-Pacific region, lying at the crossroad of international shipping and airlines. Filipino managers and technical staff are known for their competence and dynamic, as well as highly skilled workers. As early as 320 AD, Filipinos were already practicing the seafaring profession and fishing operations in the country, as well as the art of shipbuilding, particularly in the construction of boats called balangay, balanghay, and the galleon ships. And with deep water spaces that offers a great support location for ports and shipyards. The Philippine maritime industry still maintains its global position, and the maritime sector is increasingly contributing to the country's economic despite the maritime sector's challenges. The Philippines takes pride in our strong performance in complying with the International Maritime Manpower, Safety, Security, and Marine Environmental Protection Standards. The Philippines is one of the most largest archipelagic countries in the world, composed of about 7,641 islands. It has the fifth longest coastline in the world, with its 36,289 kilometers of coastline. The Philippines is also, we all know, the premier source of sea-based manpower. It was ranked among the top fishery and aquatic culture-producing countries in the world, and also ranked among the top leading in the rest of the world shipbuilding group after Korea, China, and Japan. The numbers speaks for itself, and the important potential that presents the Philippines as the maritime seascape. The Philippines ranks as the fourth among the most affected countries by the adverse impact of the climate change. In recent years, we were hit by unexplained super typhoons. We have experienced the first time strong winds, heavy rains, and flash floods may cause typhoon in the country. Remember Pablo? Remember Yolanda? These are samples of typhoons that barreled through the Philippines in 2012 and 2013, respectively. This kind of catastrophe events brought about by climate change would impair economic growth in Southeast Asia, especially the Philippines. And it is estimated that the combined destruction brought by these typhoons, which barred through the Philippines, will damage about 18.6 billion US dollars, or approximately 800 billion pesos. Sad to say that these harmful effects of climate change resulted for the destruction of life, property, and marine ecosystem, relocation of coastal communities to higher grounds, and shortage of land area to accommodate displaced populations. Disasters bring heavily in the most vulnerable and vulnerable segments of our country's population, especially the underprivileged. As Mother Nature continues to send signs through this phenomenon that brings catastrophic event to our world, we should now be proactive to take space and step possible to reduce and even reverse climate change. We at the Maritime Industry Authority is exerting all efforts to address climate change in general and to facilitate, develop, adapt, and implement policies and measures to link the emission of GHG, in particular in coordination with the Commission of Climate Change, Department of Energy, and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. In order to mitigate the adverse effect of climate change and to ensure full and effective implementation of relevant marine environment protection standards in the country, particularly on decarbonization, MARINA have created on September 2021 the National Strategic Action Plan, NSAP, entitled Green and Clean Maritime Philippines, protect, and conserve. This plan serves as the roadmap in our implementation of the Marine Environment Protection Conventions, where decarbonization in shipping is part of. The NSAP is part of the long-term plan, which we call the 10-year Maritime Industry Development Plan, MIDP, which covers the overriding core and enabling programs to accelerate the development of the integrated and competitive maritime industry through education, innovation, technology, and sustainability. The prevention and reduction of the marine pollution from ports, ships, and shipyards through the implementation of this strategy on marine environment protection is one of the overriding program of the MIDP. This overriding program has 4 strategies, and each strategies has component that is further translated to a strategic voyage plan, SBP 2028, to implement certain deliverables of the MARINA in the 10th year MIDP, providing herewith the process and key initiatives by which our vision is achieved. The following slides show you some of the initiatives pertaining to emission of GHG. As early as 1991, the Philippines has been proactive in responding to the impact GHG emission in the atmosphere. It was during that year that the Philippine Strategy for Sustainable Development, PSSD, and the Philippine Agenda 21, PA21, were formulated, which laid down the national agenda for sustainable development for the 20th century, geared toward having a harmonious integration of a sound and variable economy, responsible governance, social cohesion, and harmony, and economical integrity to ensure that development is in life enhancement progress. The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was officially ratified by the Philippines on April 15, 1998, committed the country to the vision set by the NOx Annex 1 party, prepare its national communication of GHG Commission sources. The Philippines adopted a model mitigation plan patterned after previous commitments made by Annex 1. The Philippines signed the protocol for Kyoto on April 1998 and ratified on November 2003. The country then set out to participate in the clean development mechanism of the Kyoto Protocol to quantify emission limitation targets and meets its sustainable development goals and objectives. Per Department of Environment, Natural and Resources, there are CDM projects registered, such as renewable energy projects and waste-to-energy projects. There is also the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, wherein the Philippines ratified in 2017. In 1999, Republic Act number 8749, likewise known as the Philippine Air Act of 1999, was enacted. Also, Republic Act number 9729, likewise known as the Philippine Climate Change Act of 2009, was approved and amended further by RA 10174 in 2012. And in 2018, Republic Act 11285, likewise known as the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act of 2018, was approved. Considering that the Philippines acceded the Annex 6 of MARPOL 73-78, there are several memorandum circulars issued by the MARINA, which is Memorandum Circular SR 2020-06 on the rules and regulation on the mandatory of 0.5% sulfur limit on fuel oil for all Filipino registered ships in compliance with Annex 6 MARPOL 73-78 as amended by 2025, and Memorandum Circular Number SR 2021-05 on the rules and regulation on the implementation of the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan, or we call it ESEMP, and data collection, DCS, for oil pollution consumption for the Philippine registered ships. Also, there is a House Bill number 735, an act providing for the full and effective implementation and enforcement of International Maritime Instrument, to which the Philippines is a state party. For the institutional arrangement, we aim to mobilize a whole-of-nation approach cooperation in protecting, conserving, and managing the marine environment and natural resources for the present and future generation. In 2015, the two-year Globe Fouling Partnership Program aimed supporting increased update and implementation of energy efficiency measures for shipping, where the Philippines is one of the lead pilot countries. This is the international or the interagency coordinating committee to facilitate the ratification and assertion to the implementation of the Maritime Convention, pursuant to Executive Number 158 issued in 28 December 2021. These task forces meet every 3 months to monitor the progress in the implementation of the IMO instrument, as well as the efforts on the ratification, assertion, to and implementation on other maritime conventions. This has its own web portal for being developed to consolidate information, technical inputs, and materials related to ratification for this convention. Launched last February 11, 2021, the Marina Training Institute of MARTI in Bacolod City, Philippines, is also one of the components of the National Strategic Action Plan under capacity development. This is envisioned to be developed as the country's Maritime Innovation and Knowledge Center under the 10th-year Marina Development Plan, which is also proposed under the IMO NORAD project. The MARTI aims to cover trainings and seminars to relevant IMO conventions. The center shall continue to serve as the center or the training facility of Marina, providing professional development courses, management courses, and specialized courses for government personnel and maritime professionals. A training calendar is now being developed by Marina for this year and the years ahead. We also aim to establish systems that would make Philippine ships and ports compliant with the International Maritime Environment Protection Standards, particularly decarbonization of shipping. We have an existing cooperation agreement with DOST to implement maritime marine transport-related science and technologies activities and research and development, R&Ds, in order to support the local adoption of new and emerging maritime marine transport technologies and innovation. The Philippine Ports Authority, an active member of the APEC Port Service Network, implements the GPAS, Green Port Award System program. It is a green evaluation system for ports in the APEC region developed by APEC Port Service Network. It represents the integral part of APEC Transportation Working Group ongoing efforts to promote the green growth of the port industry. Here are some of the major challenges on decarbonization in shipping in the country, but not limited to growing number of Philippine fleet in the domestic trade consisting of old ships. We need to integrate information collection of data information coming from different concerned agencies, coordination among several concerned agencies, particularly in collecting the necessary data, need for system at country and regional level to obtain comprehensive baseline information on decarbonization in shipping. There is still a need to facilitate our technical personnel on energy efficiency and other related fields. Political support, which is necessary to push for specific policy that addresses decarbonization and shipping, particularly in the domestic trade. National legislation is necessary to address GHG emission risks in the shipping sector. There is an overlapping of functions and efforts among concerned government agencies, considering lead agency responsible for us, say decarbonization in shipping and other are well not defined. We are aware of these things. We need to build and capacitate our management, our people, to respond to the decarbonization in the shipping sector issues and concerns to address the maritime issues for the stakeholders. As to the way forward, there are ongoing activities on marine environment protection that needs to be completed by the end of the year up to 2028 to promote the use of the various energy efficiency technology for maritime-based mode of transport that would support the logistic and supply chain industries, such as the monitoring of MARINA MCSR 2021-05 on the implementation of the SEEMP under MARPOL Annex 6 by 2025, as well as the development of policy on the implementation of the technical code on control of emission of nitrogen oxide from marine diesel engine, or the NOx technical code. This is to specify the requirements for the testing, survey, and certification of marine diesel engines to ensure they comply with the nitrogen oxide emission limits under Regulation 13 of Annex 6 of MARPOL 7378. There are also other projects that we are undertaking with the OST, UP, and other agencies and our stakeholders. We also have a existing bilateral agreement with the Netherlands and Denmark. We also have the integration of environment, sustainable water support strategies for the MIDP, including climate change strategy, which is incorporated with the DNR action plan. We also created the technical working group, and then we have streamlined the climate change in the Philippines, shipping sector, energy management, and port system infrastructures, development of innovative financing scheme to promote environmental such as technologies, and of course, development of a pool of experts in our agency for the ship energy management, climate change adaptation, and mitigation, among others. With all these initiatives, we respectfully request everyone to support us for the MARINA activities relative to climate change, for a greener and cleaner ships, ports, and shipyard. That's all. Thank you very much at magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. God bless us all.
Maraming salamat po, Engineer Mamisaw of the Marina Shipyards Regulation Service. We are 5 minutes ahead of our scheduled time, and that gives me a time to recognize some officials of our authority here. We have the Executive Director of the SCCW Office of Marina, Sir Sam Batalla. We also thank the unwavering support of our Management, Financial, and Administrative Services, Director Atienza. Maraming salamat po for gracing the event. We have the napakaaga po na dumalo ng ating mga chairman, Board of Marine Deck, and Board of Marine Engineer Officers po. They have to officiate the oath-taking this afternoon, happening in this hall also. Pero sa afternoon session pa po natin yun. Likewise, there is a simultaneous event ongoing in all Marina regional offices. Wala lang tayong patch ngayon po, tinatanong ko yung ating comms, but they have their own celebrations as well as an ITF Summit and Expo happening at the Philippine International Convention Center, which will continue, I believe, until tomorrow for the ITF Summit. Proceeding to our symposium, our next speaker is a certified public accountant and a licensed environmental planner. He entered the Coast Guard service in 2005 as a line officer. During his early career in the Coast Guard service, he was assigned to various vessels of the Philippine Coast Guard and Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources. He performed maritime law enforcement, maritime security, maritime search and rescue, and other operations. In 2011, he was assigned to the national headquarters of the Philippine Coast Guard and performed various duties, particularly on fiscal, budgeting, and accounting. He attended various training on financial management, taxation, procurement, and environmental planning. In 2020, he took his master's degree in public management, major in development and security, with a specialization in maritime safety and security at the Development Academy of the Philippines. After obtaining a master's degree, at the same year, he was assigned to the Coast Guard Human Resource Management Command as Chief of Staff from July 2021 to March 2022. After that, he was designated as Deputy Chief of Staff for Controllership from March to January 2023. Presently, he is currently assigned as the Chief of Staff for Marine Environmental Protection Command. To present on the roles of the seafarers in saving the planet, please welcome Coast Guard Captain Richard Cua Paragas.
To our Marina Administrator, Attorney Hernani and Pabia, distinguished guests, seafarers, and other visitors, good morning. So the marine environmental protection is one of the major functions of the Philippine Coast Guard. In this regard, the PCG enforces applicable maritime international conventions for the prevention of pollution from ships. This will be the topic in the duration of my presentation. So the scope of my presentation will be as follows. The authority of the Philippine Coast Guard, IMO conventions relating to marine environmental protection. The laws authorizing the PCG to protect the marine environment are the following. Republic Act 9993, the Philippine Coast Guard Law of 2009. As mentioned earlier, one of the major functions of the PCG is marine environmental protection. It enforces applicable maritime international conventions for the prevention of pollution from ship. Presidential Decree number 600, Marine Pollution Decree of 1974. This decree provides the role of the PCG on deposit of refuse in navigable water, prohibition against discharge of oil and other harmful substances, and oil spill containment. Presidential Decree number 602, establishing Oil Pollution Operations Center in the Philippine Coast Guard Headquarters. The center shall be the point of contact with similar National Operations Center of ASEAN member countries, and shall cause, when necessary, the immediate call for assistance from such countries to help contain oil pollution. The center shall similarly respond to call for assistance by ASEAN member countries. And the last one is Presidential Decree number 979, providing for the revision of Presidential Decree number 600. It incorporated the role of National Pollution Control Commission, amendments in definition of terms, and other provisions. The International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, or MARPOL 7378, is the main international convention covering prevention of pollution of the marine environment by ships from operational and accidental causes. The MARPOL Convention was adopted in November 2, 1973 at IMO. The Protocol of 1978 was adopted in response to a spate of tanker accidents in 1976 to 1977. As the 1973 MARPOL Convention had not yet entered into force, the 1998 MARPOL Protocol absorbed the parent convention. The combined instrument entered into force on October 2, 1983. The convention includes regulations aimed at preventing and minimizing pollution from ships, both accidental pollution and that from routine operations, and currently includes 6 technical annexes. Special areas with strict control on operational discharge are included in most annexes. For the technical annexes of MARPOL 7378, Annex 1 pertains to regulations for the prevention of pollution from oil. The Philippine Coast Guard, as mandated by law, issued policies pertaining to Annex 1. The PCG requires all oil water separating equipment installed on board vessels of 400 gross tonnage and above, and all tankers 150 gross tonnage and above shall be duly approved by the PCG to ensure that any oil mixture discharged in the open sea while the vessel is underway, after passing through the separators or filtering systems, have no oil or very minimal content of oil. Also, oil waste collectors shall be accredited by the PCG. They are required to apply for accreditation and secure permit from the DENR EMB for land disposal. All domestic oil tankers, regardless of tonnage, shall carry on board a shipboard oil pollution emergency plan, duly approved by the PCG. Annex 2 regulation pertains to the control of pollution of noxious liquid substances in bulk. The policy of the PCG that relates to Annex 2 is the tank cleaning operation, which shall be undertaken by contractors duly accredited by the Philippine Coast Guard. Tank cleaning operations shall be conducted with the proper clearance from the PCG through Marine Environmental Protection Command. A clearance is required for every tank cleaning operation. Chemicals, oil, and other harmful substances shall be disposed by depositing it to DNR EMB accredited reception facility or PCG approved dumping areas. Annex 3 pertains to regulations for the prevention of pollution by harmful substances carried by sea in package form. The PPA issued rules and regulations pertaining to the environmental management and handling of dangerous goods in ports. This is about detailed standards on packing, marking, labeling, documentations, stowage, quantity limitations, exceptions, and notifications for preventing pollution by harmful substances. Annex 4 pertains to regulation for the prevention of pollution by sewage from ships. The PCG applies this regulation to all vessels with 400 gross tonnage and above, and all vessels less than 400 gross tonnage, which is certified to carry more than 15 persons. Vessels are required to have a sewage pollution prevention certificate issued by the Philippine Coast Guard or country of registry of foreign registered vessel. Vessels shall be provided with either holding tanks, marine sanitation devices, or sewage treatment plant. Annex 5 pertains to regulations for the prevention of pollution by garbage from ships. All port reception facilities, garbage collectors must be accredited by the PCG. All ships are required to discharge their garbage waste in port reception facilities, garbage collection site, except for waste that can be discharged at sea. Officers on board and or the crew shall assist in the recovery and proper disposal of potentially harmful garbage and maintain garbage management plan. Annex 6 of MARPOL 73-78, this will be the last annex, technical annexes, pertains to regulation for the prevention of air pollution from ship. The IMO 2020 regulation limits sulfur in ships' fuel oil to a maximum of 0.50%, representing an 80% cut from the 3.50% limit. The regulation has been enforced globally since 1 January 2020, with benefits for the environment and human health from a reduction in sulfur oxides in the air. MARINA permits the use of gas cleaning system or scrubber to comply with the low sulfur fuel oil limit. The International Convention on Oil Pollution Preparedness, Response, and Cooperation 1990. The rules, for the rules and regulations issued by the PCG relative to this convention, the National Oil Spill Contingency Plan issued by the PCG requires vessels, facilities, and business establishments that handle and stored oil to craft an oil spill contingency plan and maintain oil spill equipment and supplies on board, such as oil spill boom, skimmer, dispersant, sorbents, oil tanks, and PPE. The National Oil Spill Contingency Plan aims to provide clear directions, guidelines, policies, and procedures in case of oil spill, and to have a timely and coordinated response mechanism for the containment, mitigation, and recovery of oil. Protocol to the Convention on the Prevention of Marine Pollution by Dumping of Waste in Other Matters, 1972. It shall be unlawful for any person to discharge, dump, permit, and discharge of noxious, gaseous, and liquid substances, toxic and hazardous waste, infectious, pathological waste, and other matters in any form, in or out from company, refineries, terminals, depots, ports, oil companies, ships, tankers, barges, dredgers, oil and gas explorers, power plants, and shipyards, and other establishments into or upon Filipino maritime jurisdiction. Prior approval of the PCG, the dumping of waste in other matters in whatever form or conditions should be allowed, provided that this shall be subjected to the terms and conditions, such as the company project is covered by environmental compliance certificate, submission of laboratory analysis from DNR or its accredited laboratories with acceptable environmental parameters, compositions of waste to be dumped, and consider waste management options such as reuse, recycling, treatment to reduce or remove the hazardous constituents, and disposal on land. The PCG shall only issue a special permit for dumping once all the impact evaluations are completed and monitoring requirements are determined. International Convention on the Control of Harmful Anti-Fouling System on Ships, 2001. This is to prevent the utilization of harmful anti-fouling system paints and other anti-fouling systems that contain harmful substances in all Philippine registered ships. MARINA issues an anti-fouling system certificate and certificate of marine paint in compliance with Anti-Fouling System Convention. International Convention for the Control and Management of Ships, Ballast Water, and Sediments. This aims to promote the effective prevention of spread of harmful aquatic organisms from other regions to Philippine waters to avoid damage to the country's marine environment from ballast water discharge by minimizing an uptake and subsequent discharge of sediments and organisms. MARINA issues international ballast water management. Some of the requirements are the following: ballast water management plan, ballast water record book, ballast water treatment system. So I'm done with important international conventions, but of course, implementation of international conventions are not enough to avert marine environmental degradation. Here, some of the ways to reduce marine pollution. Some of these are based only on my opinion. Of course, to promote recycling and circular economy. If there are recycling companies, I think there will be more people and entities that will be willing to collect marine debris and plastic pollution. Even the PCG may collect marine debris as part of its community service. According to the United Nations Conference on the Trade and Development, a circular economy entails markets that give incentives to reusing products rather than scrapping them and then extracting new resources. In such an economy, all forms of waste such as clothes, scrap metal, and obsolete electronics are returned to the economy or used more efficiently. The next one is a strict implementation of sewage treatment plan, especially establishment near coastal areas to prevent discharge of contaminants into the sea. The next one is relocate informal settlers located in coastal areas. I think we already know how they contribute to marine pollution. And the last one is a passage of the Archipelagic Sea Lane Bill. And the PCG should establish a vessel tracking and ship reporting system. This will give the PCG notice of the presence of either all or specific kinds of ships within particular waters so that it can be react better in the event of the developing maritime emergency, safeguarding both the marine environment and the safety of individuals at sea. So that will be my last slide. Thank you. Happy Seafarers Days and good morning.
Maraming salamat po, Captain Paragas, for a very timely review of the international conventions on prevention of marine pollution and other international conventions relating to prevention or protection of the marine environment. Still ahead of time, I have 3 minutes to recognize some personalities here. First of all, the celebration of the Day of the Seafarer is an international event, and we have the parallel event here in the Philippines, which we call the Day of the Filipino Seafarer. So we recognize the immense contribution of the Overseas Shipping Service, who is ably represented here by their OFIC Director, Ma'am Presi. Magandang umaga po. Likewise, the support of the division chiefs from the STCW office and the Manpower Development Service. Salamat po sa suporta para sa matagumpay na pagdiriwang ng Day of the Filipino Seafarer. In attendance in this symposium are student representatives. We call them cadets in the Philippines, by the way, from the Asian Institute of Asian Institute of Maritime Studies. Namamali ko yun sa AIMS sa Makati, no? Sa AIMS po, they are here. From Fiati University. Pare-parehas kasi yung uniform, no? And from PMMS Las Piñas and PMMS Manila. Magandang umaga po. Thank you for joining the symposium. Snappy. To continue with our symposium, our next speaker has worked with the shipping and renewable energy his entire career. His shipping career saw him learn from Maersk, Odgefell Chemical Tankers, Aboyab, and now Noatun Maritime, which he founded with a business partner in May 2020. If we think about it, starting a crewing company just as the whole world was shutting down from COVID-19 sounds unintelligent, but he make it work. In renewable energy, he worked with two multinational Norway-based companies, SN Power and Escatec. With the latter, he was and is involved in projects aiming to produce green molecules to help decarbonize shipping, as well as offshore wind projects in the Philippines. With this combined background, he is well positioned to elevate the multiple impacts of decarbonizing shipping. In addition to his roles in shipping and renewables, he is the president of the Philippine-Norway Business Council. Personally, he's a firm believer in the ultimate renewable energy source, human energy. Please welcome our next speaker, Sir Carl Martin Fanesen.
Good morning, everyone. Right. I enjoy looking out at this crowd because here we have everything. We have people who will be out there sailing very soon. We have people who are supporting them, and we also have a large number of people who have been sailing but are now supporting the maritime industry from ashore. I would like to express my personal gratitude to MARINA under the able management of Administrator Attorney Fabian to have welcomed me, and obviously those thanks include the executive directors and the STCW team in particular. Now, here we are talking about the Green Deal for cruise ships and the planet. You'll have to forgive me, I tend to go very fast when you go through these things. We have 20 minutes, and this is a very, very, very big topic, so let's get going. What we're talking about is an energy transition. And there's nothing new in this to the maritime world. This was the first energy transition in shipping. Prior to that, we were basically following the currents and hoping they would bring us where we wanted to go. Some clever person invented this, and that was the first energy transition in shipping. Then, me being from Norway, you'll have to forgive the next illustration, we invented the sail, which was the second energy transition in shipping, right? And with this, and with the increasingly clever usage of sails, we were able to a greater extent dictate where we wanted to go. Shipping suddenly became useful, right? And then, we've been through many of these, okay? These energy transitions in shipping. So what we're talking about later is nothing new, right? Then you have the third energy transition. Some of you may know this guy. His name is Napoleon. Have you heard of him? Yeah. Okay, he was a pretty good general, but he was a really shitty seafarer, right? Because this guy called Robert Fulton, a British guy, he invented the steamboat, the marine steam engine. And he thought, okay, I should present this to Napoleon, he can make me rich. So he went to Paris, he presents the whole idea of a marine steam engine to Napoleon, and Napoleon says, you want to make a ship sail against the wind by lighting a bonfire beneath deck? I don't have time for this nonsense. Being French, he probably said stronger words, right? Robert Fulton went back to the UK, bestowed his idea upon the Royal Navy, and that allowed the UK to be the preeminent navy for the next 150 years. But this was the advent of steam, which again freed shipping from currents and winds, allowing shipping to yet again become even more useful. There's a slight problem with this, right? Because what was it they were burning in the steam boilers? Anyone? Coal. Yes, thank you. And this is a map. You'll have to forgive the lack of clarity. Which shows all the main coaling stations for the Royal Navy in 1906, I believe. There was a big coaling station in Manila, by the way. So for those of you with an interest in maritime history, you can look into it. The reason they had coaling stations with considerable densities in some areas was that from an energy density perspective, coal is not that great. There is a lot of energy losses when you convert coal to steam, which again is converted to mechanical energy. right? You have two energy conversions there, so it's very inefficient. So when we then came to the fourth energy transition, which started in the early 1900s, but really only accelerated after World War II, we were looking at oil, right? And as John D. Rockefeller said, the best business in the world is a well-run oil company. The second best is a badly run oil company. And you may have been right, because if you put your savings into oil companies, your savings would have done really well, yeah? But this was oil, and let's see if we can get this to work. Here's the problem, okay? Oil contains carbon. It is a hydrocarbon. It's not a carbohydrate, it's a hydrocarbon, right? And the main thing to bear in mind there is the carbon. Now, the graph there shows CO2 emissions from shipping since the early 70s. And you can see that even with COVID effectively limiting a lot of maritime trade, the impact was to bring shipping emissions back to the level of 2008. Right? And this is why we are now talking about transitioning towards zero carbon or lower carbon shipping. And to look into the future, this is from the International Energy Agency, it's not my graph. They're saying that in order for shipping to play its role in all these decarbonization targets that have been set globally, by 2030, right, we need to have biofuels at a level we cannot see any sign of today. We need to have zero or low carbon energy sources. By the way, is everybody aware of the difference between, say, biodiesel and diesel? So, quick yes or no? Regular diesel, MGO, that's fossil fuels, right? It's a fraction distilled out of crude oil. Whereas biodiesel is diesel that you generate from typically plant or agricultural waste materials, right? To put it bluntly, biodiesel you grow, regular diesel you pump, right? So there is a lot of work that needs to be done in these sectors in order for us to be on target by 2030. Some of you may think 2030 is a long time away. In shipping, no. What's the average life expectancy of a ship? Say 25, 30 years. How long time does it take from, if you count backwards, when you launch a ship, how many years prior did you finalize the design? 3 to 4 years typically, right? So the vessels we launch in 2030, they are now being designed. So we don't have a lot of time. And that brings us to the fifth energy transition in the maritime sector, which is zero carbon fuels, right? So first of all, we have to kill some misinformation. Are we running on PowerPoint or PDF? Okay. Here's the challenge, right? If you, I'm sorry this is not clearer, if you look at the little blue line there, that is CO2, atmospheric CO2 concentration over the last 800,000 years, okay? This isn't guesswork, this is hardcore science. You drill deep enough down into the Antarctic ice sheet and so on, and you can extract air bubbles that are 800,000 years old, and you will know exactly how much CO2 was in the atmosphere at that particular time. So, when you run into these climate idiots, pardon my expression, who say, oh, you can't possibly know that, you're making it up. No, hell no. This is hardcore, okay? Any scientist will be able to explain you how this works. Now, the sad thing is that we are currently, by 2021, at almost 415 parts per million CO2. That is the highest we have had in over 800,000 years. A lot of people will then go out and say, oh, CO2 is plant food, blah, blah. Yeah, it would have been, but you see, the problem is we are really good at chopping down forests, right? So that argument doesn't fly. And even worse, our species, Homo sapiens, when did we first arrive? approximately 300,000 years ago. Okay? We as a species have never had to adapt to a world governed by very high CO2 levels in the atmosphere. Okay? When people say, oh, we've had higher before, yes, we have, but there were no human beings around. We didn't exist. Okay? So, forget that argument as well. So this is serious stuff. Right? So kill the misinformation, and we are now at 415 parts per million, and it's increasing. And then we can talk about the front runners. Okay? There are two molecules that are leading the charge to decarbonize shipping: methanol and ammonia. Now, how many of you can spot one challenge with methanol based on this illustration? Anyone? You see it has a black atom in there? Carbon. Right? And you can ask, okay, if you're going to burn methanol, how can that be a zero carbon fuel? I'll come back to that. Or even a low carbon fuel. The one on the left, NH3 ammonia. Here's the thing, right? We have been shipping these things for decades. We know how to handle both molecules safely and in a maritime environment. What we are not that comfortable with yet is what happens when you want to put them into your main engine and auxiliaries and start burning them. Right? The first one, methanol, is effectively a drop-in fuel. Right? You don't need to do anything about your tanks, about your valves, your pipes, etc. You have to change certain aspects of the engine, your injector nozzles, your fuel pumps, and so on. But you don't have to do much, so you can also retrofit. Ammonia, slightly different. Here's a lot of people will say ammonia is very toxic. Yeah, it is if you don't know how to deal with it. However, each and every one of us every day produce quite a lot of ammonia in our intestine. It is a big part of how our bodies break down proteins. Proteins are nitrogen-heavy compounds. We produce ammonia every day inside our bodies, and it's brought to the liver and neutralized. That doesn't mean you should drink the stuff. Please don't. Right? But it is a substance that we are familiar with also biologically. We know what this thing does to our body. Methanol, what happens if you drink methanol? First symptom, you go blind, irreversibly. Right? We'll come back to some of these safety issues. Methanol production, as I said, you can have zero or low carbon. This is an illustration I stole from Maersk. I've had many conversations with Maersk over the past 18 months about this. Very briefly, if you look at the top, you start with waste biomass. It can be bagasse in Negros. Bagasse is actually a fantastic biomass source for producing methanol. Really, really good, right? You create biogas, you run it through the whole process with mass balancing, you extract the biomethane or the bio-LNG if you like, and you end up with something called biomethanol. But this is quite energy intensive, and if you don't base it on renewables, it's not zero carbon, it's low carbon, but it's still less than half of the emissions of what we're doing today. Go all the way down to the bottom where you start with renewable electricity. You do electrolysis you desalinate seawater, you electrolyze it into oxygen and hydrogen, you capture the hydrogen, right? You combine that with also a bit of the oxygen with biogenic carbon. Again, things like bagasse, rice, straw, and so on are fantastic sources of biogenic carbon. So this last one, it is fully possible to do this in the Philippines. The challenge you have is that in order for this to become even remotely financially viable, you need really, really low electricity prices. And if it's one thing we don't have in the Philippines, it's really, really low electricity prices. So you'll see a lot of this will be done in places like Egypt, Morocco, and so on, where they have a lot of sun. They have a lot of desert where nobody is living, so they can put up solar panels, and they can produce profitably. They can produce electricity down to 3 pesos per kilowatt hour. Yeah, 3 pesos. And the energy producer still makes money at that level. So some nations have good conditions, some nations have less good conditions, right? Ammonia, this is an overview from Yara, which are also present here in the Philippines. This is much easier because there is no carbon, right? It's nitrogen and hydrogen. A lot of people talk about, oh, hydrogen is the future. Yeah, maybe it is, but the energy density when you carry it is really low. So for short sea shipping, for domestic shipping in the Philippines, maybe it is. Maybe hydrogen is the fuel of the future, but it's going to take some time to get there because, again, it's expensive infrastructure to build and operate. Very simple: water, renewable energy, and air. That's all you need to create ammonia. Okay? We have a lot of ocean here. We have a lot of air. Again, we don't really have cheap electricity, so this is going to be tricky. However, if you look at the roadmap from the Department of Energy and the amount of renewable energy they want to put on the grid in the Philippines over the next 20 years, here's the thing. When we have the typhoons coming in, right, towards the east coast of the Philippines, every single wind turbine will start spinning like mad, and they will produce more power than the grid can take. So the operators will be told to turn off turbines, right? It's too much power coming to the grid. You know, fuses are beginning to blow, so to speak. But instead of wasting that energy, why not funnel it into something like this, right? Let the turbines spin, capture that energy, convert it to ammonia. That means you can store this, right? And that energy is energy the developer normally wouldn't be able to sell anyway, so you can get it cheap, right? So there will be opportunities in this space in the Philippines, but it's going to take 5 to 10 years before they really materialize. Safety concerns, I touched upon that. Let's do methanol first. Ingestion, and it's like, you shouldn't get this on or in you. It's that simple. It can be fatal, right? If you do a little research online, then depending on your body size and where you get it, the lethal dose is 20 to 65 grams. That's not a lot. 10 milliliters, in other words, sort of like your standard doctor syringe. If you drink that and you don't get treated quite quickly, you're blind, and you're blind for life, right? It also is very flammable and very explosive when you mix it with air. So this thing in the engine room needs a certain level of caution. It's very reactive with both acids and oxidizers. Both acids and oxidizers are present in the engine room, separate lockers, etc. But we all know that in the heat of the action, sometimes you make a mistake and you grab the wrong bottle, so to speak. So there are some safety concerns with methanol. From a MARPOL perspective, methanol is a minor MARPOL pollutant. I'm not saying it's safe to dump it into the sea, not at all, you shouldn't. But if you do have spillage into the ocean, it is not catastrophic. You're not going to kill all marine life almost instantly. Ammonia, same. If you get this on or in you, it can be fatal. The only reason your body can produce ammonia is that it produces it in the one location where it knows how to treat it without killing you. The lethal dose is 4 to 5 grams per kilo of body weight. So for a person of my size, I would have to drink quite a lot. For people of a smaller size, obviously a couple of tablespoons will be enough to create a really bad day. It is non-flammable, right? It's very difficult for you to set fire to ammonia, but when you get ammonia vapor, that can be explosive. It reacts with oxidizers, not so much with acids, so it is marginally safer than methanol there. From a MARPOL perspective, ammonia is bad. It is incredibly reactive with pretty much anything you find in the ocean, and as a MARPOL pollutant, it's quite high, quite strong. So, but here's the thing, right? If somebody had brought HFO or MGO to market today as something new, we would have had the same concerns. This shit is explosive. It burns. It's a marine pollutant. You definitely don't want to get this on your skin, etc., etc. The reason we don't think about it is that we have been training ourselves for generations how to operate HFO, VLSFO, and MGO. Right? We have almost three generations of experience in how to handle these safely. And these new fuels will follow the same pattern, hopefully a little bit faster, because we are, as a species, smarter today than we were 3 generations ago. We know more. So as I said, they're both being produced, they're being shipped, they're moved around the world every day in huge volumes already. We know how to deal with these things. We just don't know how to operate them in an engine space. There are good safety procedures in place for how to handle them, but then you come to the bunkering process, right? The world's first ammonia bunkering process was done in Singapore earlier this year. And they have documented a detailed risk analysis and a first shot at a bunkering procedure for ammonia. Same for methanol. There are now procedures in place, and they will be incorporated. For those of you who are interested, ammonia will be probably incorporated into the IGF code. Methanol, I'm not sure yet where exactly that will come in. But this means that training becomes critical, right? The question is by when, right? There will be a day where your principal, your manning agent, will say, I need to see your type-specific fuel certificate, right? Because they need to know if you are a part of the team that will be dealing with bunkering or day-to-day management of fuel, that you have, for example, a methanol certificate or an ammonia certificate, right? It's almost like ECDIS, right? Type-specific ECDIS. What does this mean for crew? Here we look forward a little bit, and this is where it gets interesting. By 2030, 80% of ships will still run on the fuels we have today. HFO with scrubbers, VLSFO, MGO, and an increasing amount of LNG. 8 out of 10 ships, right? In other words, all those of you who have graduated or are about to graduate, you are, by this year, 99% likely to go on a ship where you do not need to know anything about methanol, ammonia, and so on. It's too early, right? If you fast forward to 2060, it's a little different, right? 60% of ships will be on low or zero carbon fuels by 2050. But there will still be 40% of the world fleet running on high carbon fuels. In other words, there will be a transition, but it will take time, and it will give all Filipino seafarers both time and the opportunity to retrain or add training in order to be compatible also with zero carbon fuels. But then it gets really interesting, right? Because there's an overlap happening here, right? One is obviously decarbonization. The other is digitalization. You cannot go to a maritime event without hearing somebody, typically from Kongsberg or one of the big equipment suppliers, Alfa Laval, right, talk about digitalization, right? And the last one is demographics. Now, what happens here, okay? First of all, kids here in the Philippines who start primary school this year, right, they're going to graduate from university with their bachelor in marine engineering, whatever, close to 2040. We have no clue what the world will look like in 2040, right? 2 years ago, none of us predicted that there would be a war in Ukraine, which would drive demand for Filipino seafarers through the roof. We had no idea. So all we know is that kids starting school today, they graduate in 2040, 2038, 2040. When we get to 2040, the GDP per capita, i.e. the domestic value creation in the Philippines per person, will get to somewhere around $12,000 per person per head. And what you see in other markets where crewing has been a big industry is that once you get to about 12,000, your interest in sailing as a rating drops off. If you can make $1,000 a month staying at home, being with your family every day, compared to making $1,100 a month being gone for 9 months of the year, you'll stay at home. Why should you go out there in a high-risk occupation, far away from your loved ones 9 months of the year, when you can make almost as much money staying at home. Right? So there is a demographic challenge here, but it's still 12, 15 years into the future. But that means for all those who work with education, you don't have until 2040. You need to plan now. What is going to happen to that curriculum? Right? Because technology and digitalization will have an outlandish impact on this. Right? Because the more technology you put on board ships, the less people you need. Right? 40 years ago, you had 40, 50 people on a bulk carrier. Today, you're 21, 22 if you're lucky. You know, the world's largest container ships, they can actually operate with 14 people on board. They don't do that, thankfully, but they could operate with 14 people on board. And with the advent of increasingly advanced technology also on ships, you have Starlink now giving you real-time connection to the vessel to do full digital remote monitoring of whatever happens. More and more positions will migrate from the vessel to shore. Right? And there is one company called Ocean Infinity. They are on record with these plans. Right? And I know they have been in discussions with MARINA already, because if you are remotely controlling a ship, let's say you're sitting here in Manila at a workstation, you have 4 or 5 big screens, and you're sitting in the control chair of an offshore vessel, and you are controlling this ship remotely. You're not on board. And you know, it's 8 o'clock in the morning, your shift started, by 4 o'clock you're leaving because another guy will come to replace you. Right? You are there controlling this ship 8 hours every day. But you are not on board. Is it sea service? Nobody has a good answer to that question yet. Right? What happens to the whole concept of sea service once you have remotely controlled vessels? You see it with ROV operators today, remote, these underwater robots, right, that go down and do inspections and basic repairs. Right? In the old days, the ROV operator was physically on board the ship, sitting next to the guy operating the dynamic positioning system. Today, increasingly, the ROV operators, they're sitting in a nice, comfortable office next to the coffee machine, and they're doing everything from shore. Right? They don't talk about sea service anymore for ROV operators. They talk how many hours do you have operating the ROV. Right? And the whole framework, starting with STCW, right, flag state requirements and so on, will have to evolve to capture also that development of life at sea. Right? And what skills will be needed? Right? People you talk to will say, actually, the future captain of a remote-controlled ship is probably a really good computer gamer. Right? He's really good at looking at screens and building a picture of reality. Right? He may get seasick just looking at the ocean, but that's okay because he doesn't have to be there. He can do his job from an office here in Manila. So I think all of us who are here, we have a fantastic opportunity to be early movers. Why is that? Because all the young Filipinos in the room, you were born and raised online. You cannot walk down a street without looking at your phone. Right? So older people like me, we have to look at you so we don't crash into you, because you are there. We call you phone zombies, right? You just walk straight. But you will be able to make that transition, right? People like me won't. So we have to start thinking now about what does this mean. You have decarbonization, digitalization, and demographics. All these, the 3 Ds, they work together here. Decarbonization means you need to understand a different set of chemistries, a different set of safe operating procedures and so on when you're on board the ship. Digitalization means 20 years from now, maybe you don't have to be on board that much. Right? So a few recommendations for my friends in MARINA, the Board of Examiners and so on. For the time being, just today, you don't have to change your curriculum or your training or anything like that. You can create fuel variety awareness with a 1 or 2 hour online class. Put it into MISMO. Tell every seafarer that you will not be allowed to renew your certificates unless we can see in MISMO that you have completed this fuel variety awareness training. So that if you are talking to a captain from somewhere in Europe and he says, what do you think about methanol? You can explain what you think about methanol because you have learned enough to form an initial opinion, right? I also strongly encourage MARINA, possibly also CHED, to start engaging very strongly with two key stakeholders in this. The first is the Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization. They sit in Singapore. Their CEO, Professor Lin Lu, is a rock star. Okay? Whenever you have her at a conference, she's great, and she really knows her stuff. She has a great team around her, and they are very practical, hands-on people. In Copenhagen, you have the Maersk Mc-Kinney Møller Center for Zero Carbon Shipping. It's a very long name, but you know, if you pay for it, you get your name on it, right? They also are very thoughtful around what does this entail for seafarers, but also for society at large. You know, MARINA has a plan, right, for towards 2040, how to decarbonize shipping. That is indeed a whole of nation, whole of society effort. And also start working with your representatives in IMO, especially on STCW, because digitalization will drive changes in STCW, right? If you are never on board a ship, how many of your STCW basic trainings do you really need, right? Do you need basic firefighting if you will never be on a ship, right? Do you need to learn how to put on your protective equipment? Do you need to learn how to operate a lifeboat, man overboard, and so on? I mean, a lot of these basic building blocks in STCW are suddenly at play, right? And that means that this whole framework has to evolve for a future where there will be less and less people on board. Midterm, the bachelor degree curricula needs to be updated, right? Especially on the engine side, marine engineering, so that all future marine engineers understand the chemistries involved and understand the risks that if you have, you know, let's say you have a chief engineer who is not really into it, and you are there as a young fourth engineer, and you see your chief engineer about to do something that you know with ammonia will endanger the ship, right? You have to be able to stop him, right? And to explain why what he's about to do is a genuinely bad idea. But that needs more than 1 to 2 hours of online training. That needs a fundamental understanding of the chemistries involved. Why does ammonium, for example, react with certain metals but not others? Why can't you take the valve which is not certified for ammonia? Well, it's because then after 14 days of operation, this valve will start spraying ammonia gas into the engine room, which is not a good situation. And last not least, STCW should be updated to include the prospect of more remote control operations. So for the future seafarers in the audience, I am green with envy because you get to be a big part of this. Right? For all those of you in MARINA and so on, I'm also green with envy because you actually get to shape a big part of this. And last, let's all make it a lot easier to deploy Filipino crew, please. Right? I had to put that in, okay? Because you know I work with crewing. 90% of our crew pool is Filipino, right? 1 out of 10 Filipinos that we deploy gets promoted on board. And then it's really, really heart-wrenching to see the glacial pace of certain processes and procedures here, which at times have forced us to go to Ukraine because the ship owner can't wait. The ship owner needs people now, right? So that's my last plea to all those of you who are on the governmental side here. Please help us speed this up. Right? We have, to take one example, we waited 4 weeks for a vessel to be accredited by POEA, even after submitting full documents. Right? In the meantime, we had to take other nationalities, which is a shame. We had really good Filipinos lined up. So all those of you here, some of you will sail and then start working, possibly for POEA and so on. Please help us make it as easy as possible to deploy Filipino crew. My name is Carl. I work with World Maritime. I thank you so much for listening to me today, and I wish especially the young people here in the room the best of luck in your future careers. And you should go show the world you cannot find a better seafarer than a really competent Filipino. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sir Carl, for that very informative and educational presentation. And we are very appreciative of the appreciation you have just mentioned. You have expressed a wonderful appreciation for Filipino seafarers. The MARINA and all the Filipino stakeholders present in this conference, in this symposium, recognize your recommendations. The Secretariat will take it to our decision makers to act on it with wholehearted appreciation of your recommendations. Well, we are actually just on time, but I know that we have to do this so that you will be more energized for the next part of our symposium, which is the open forum. We will have a quick break for 15 minutes, but please be back in this hall because we will be announcing some of more exciting activities in line with the Maritime Week and Maritime Day actually in the Philippines, which will happen in September. Activities which you might be interested to participate in. So the time now is 10:45. Please be back at the hall at exactly 11 a.m. We will have the break. Thank you and good morning.